You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. Welcome to the show. The interview subject that I have coming up for you is one of the greatest extreme metal drummers of all time, Mr. Nick Barker. The reason I was inspired to reach out to Nick to gauge his interest in appearing on the podcast is because I think, as many of you long-time listeners will know, that Cruelty and the Beast, the album released in 1998 by Cradle of Filth, is one of the greatest albums ever recorded. It certainly had a colossal impact on my own life. So we talk all about the album and a bunch of other stuff too, relating to Nick's career and life in general. This is one of those episodes, people, so whatever you're doing, I hope you're relaxed, get something to drink, or perhaps something to smoke, and just enjoy, because here he is, Drum Leviathan, Mr. Nick Barker.
Hello.
Nick, how you going?
How's it going, mate? You all right?
Yeah, doing pretty well. It's a stinking fucking hot day, excuse my language, over here, though, mate, at the moment, because we've just had 2 days of rain, so it's about 90% humidity and about 30 degrees at the moment, so I'm glad I'm in air conditioning, put it that way.
Yeah. I remember it there, up that neck of the woods to the tropics. Yeah, it can be pretty brutal.
I was actually very impressed that you actually referred to Brisbane as Brizzy during our conversations over Instagram Messenger, and only someone who'd been here a few times would do that, know to do that, actually. So you've clearly spent some time in Australia.
Yeah, I love Australia. It's one of my favourite places on earth. I'd live there in a heartbeat if it wasn't the arse and the South Pacific. You know, I had one of my ex-girlfriends was Australian. She actually lived here, and she was from Queensland, actually.
Oh, you know all about it then. Yeah, it's interesting. I've spoken to a lot of British extreme metal musicians, such as now yourself and Bill Steer, who had Australian girlfriends. There's always been that connection between us. You know, we might hate each other on the sporting pitch, but outside of that, we're basically the same people.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always said this, that I think Brits and Aussies can relate to each other more than we can do with Americans. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've got lots of American mates. They're all like top people, but Aussies and Brits, we've got more of a cultural connection, I think.
Yeah, and who was I speaking to? You're going to have to forgive me here. The guitarist in My Dying Bride, whose name I'd be able to remember at any other point in time, but of course I can't right now.
Andy?
Might have been Andy, yeah, and I had
Andy
quite
or Hamish?
Might have been Andy, actually. Yeah, definitely. I think it was Andy now, actually, from memory. Sorry, I've had well over 600 of these types of discussions, and you go off into all sorts of tangents. But it was, talking to him, the conversation was the same as the one I've just had with yourself now. And he talked about how outside of London, as soon as you get into the provinces of Britain, and I had the same conversation, I think, with Stuart as well, Stuart Anstis, your old bandmate. Yeah. It's virtually, the culture is virtually the same in Australia. We're just...
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you know, we're both like, you know, culturally we're both heavy drinkers. You know, it's all about the cricket, the rugby.
Absolutely.
You know, and you know, but you guys have got all the good weather and the better looking women.
Hey, did you see the Rugby World Cup draw that just came out a couple of hours ago?
No, I didn't know.
I didn't see where England was, but I know that once again, Australia, the Wallabies, we're in with Wales and Fiji, as we've been in the last 3 or 4 World Cup. I don't know what the hell. I mean, there's only so many countries that play rugby, as you know, but surely to goodness we could mix it up just a little, so we had some different pool outcomes.
Yeah, sure.
How's your? I did notice on Instagram, kidney stones. Have you fully recovered from the ailment?
Yes. I got to tell you, like, I would not recommend kidney stones are my worst enemy. It's even girlfriends said it's worse than childbirth. I've never experienced pain like it. Fortunately, hopefully, touch wood, I'm all done with them now. They dissolved and I passed them. But it was hell. I mean, honestly, you're in so much pain that you're vomiting just in pain. You know, it's terrible. I wouldn't. If you've had them, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I experienced a little bit of it in terms of similar pain when I had appendicitis, but I also lived with something called ulcerative colitis, which, not to be too crude, but basically means on a bad day I'll just shit blood constantly. So it's similar in terms of the pain. Like nothing seems to work except for, some occasional illicit substances, if you know what I'm saying, that are still bloody illegal but shouldn't be in Australia. But you got to do what you got to use, otherwise it doesn't. You can't get by.
Oh mate, it was horrible. I mean, there was only so much like morphine and pain meds that they could give me, and it didn't do shit. It really didn't. And I know Kevin Sharp, the vocalist from Brutal Truth and Lockup, the very first day of the Campaign for Musical Destruction tour with Napalm, it was Napalm Death, Brujeria, Lockup, and Power Trip, all on one bus. And the first gig was in Copenhagen in Denmark, and I was rooming with Kevin the day before, and he had the kidney stone flare up, and I thought he was going to die. I mean, he was in the fetal position on his bed, just going like, Barker, just kill me, do something, end it now. And this was right before the start of a 4-week tour, and how he sung, the Lockup set, like with the kidney stones, I have no idea, but that guy is an absolute trooper.
He is. Are you in touch with him these days?
Yeah. I mean, there's no bad blood or anything between me and the Lockup dudes. I mean, they're my brothers. I wasn't feeling it anymore, and I wanted to do something different. And we're all good. I mean, me, Shane, and Anton, we play in Brujeria together. So yeah, it's all good. And I spoke to Kevin probably like a couple of weeks ago.
Your resume reads like something of extreme metal's greatest hits. And for fans like myself, I found out about you guys I found out about yourself and, of course, Cradle of Filth, which was my entry into your pantheon of work back in about 1995, I think it was. So there's a whole cohort of people like myself in our early to mid-40s or thereabouts that revere the 2 albums that came out that had yourself and Stuart on the album. And I'll say, just before I continue, my discussion with Stuart for my podcast that was conducted about 3.5 years ago, just to give you some idea about the legacy of Cradle of Filth and your legacy, effectively. That's easily my most listened to podcast episode, in that I get hundreds of listens to that a month. And I've spoken to people like Don Felder from the Eagles, Peter Criss from Kiss. I mean, some pretty serious people, all things considered. And it's Stuart. And Stuart, certainly it's because of him, but that's because of the wonderful work that you guys created together and your legacy. So you're one of the 3 who I consider the 3 most integral members of Cradle of Filth, yourself, Les, and Stuart. In fact, I feel as though that if you guys weren't part of the band for the couple of years that you were there, it was about 5 years for you, wasn't it? You were in there longer than anybody else of the other 3 that I've just mentioned. But I don't believe for a moment that success would have followed for Danny in the way that it has, because
not at all.
Yeah, well, you're clearly on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, basically, for those who don't know, Filth, he has nothing. He's not a musician. He doesn't write any music. He's all about the image, the business, and the lyrics. He's the businessman. As you can probably tell with the revolving door of band members over the past 25 years or whatever. Basically, it was me, Stuart, and Les that wrote Cruelty straight up. Rob could barely tie his shoelaces most of the time, and Gian, he was just like there for the ride. It was us 3. We were there at every single rehearsal. Writing that shit. From like 12 till 5 p.m. pretty much every day. It was alive. And the stuff that when Stuart came into the fold too, during Vampire, I mean, we had an immediate chemistry, and it just made life so much easier that like being on the same page with a guitarist, and we kind of had this thing. He knew what I was thinking. See, Stuart is, he's had music lessons. He went to a music institute, music university. I'm totally self-taught. I learned to play drums by playing along to AC/DC.
Back in Black,
and it just developed from there. Many people have said to me, why don't you release like an instructional video? And the basic answer is two things. What could I show the world that Derek Roddy, John Longstreth, George Colliers, etc., 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 what could I show the world that those guys already haven't? And number two, because I'm self-taught, I have no inkling whatsoever of any of the technical terminology. A drum teacher could tell me, oh, you should play 16th single notes in the syncopated polyrhythmic. And I'd be like, huh?
Yeah.
But if he tapped it out, oh, that, easy. And that's what works really well. Stuart is very, he knows music theory, everything. And me, if it sounds good, let's roll with it. And we had a great chemistry. And then when Les came into the fold, I mean, we were good friends, and we were drinking buddies. So it just felt really natural, and the music was just pouring out. It was great times.
I can't tell you how many times I've had people contact me courtesy of no doubt it'll happen with this one too, by the way, when I air it. But the conversation with Stuart, who have contacted me, and he talked a lot about, or John as Gianna's known. Or
Blackie Useless, as we used to call him.
Well, it's a travesty that Danny doesn't recognise your contribution, because you are, of course. I mean, you were there, so you're the source material from the perspective that you know who wrote the albums, and of course you're part of the trio that did that. But for him to then go and release or re-release the album in 2019, I think it was, Remistressed, as he bizarrely called the album, and I've got to say, because I've spoken to Danny about this, one of the key reasons he's given for the remistressing is your drum sound. Now, I thought, okay, well, for fans like myself, I don't really care. That is the sound of the album, so please don't fucking touch it. I didn't like it when the guys in Led Zeppelin went and redid what they did back in the 90s. But you don't have to touch perfection, because for fans like myself, and there's a lot of us out there, this isn't just like an opinion in a bubble or in my own little personal echo chamber here. We love the way the original album sounds, okay? But I think my overall point is that is an album that is, in my opinion, the greatest black metal album ever recorded. Even more significant in its impact, and I'll go into a bit more detail about this in the moment, than De Mysteridon Satanas. And the reason for that, the reason I posit that is because of the introduction of Stuart's philosophy of new wave of British heavy metal, bringing that in to black metal, and what that did is it broke it open to a whole new audience. I got my hand up here because I was into Satyricon, Immortal, but I didn't listen to them a lot. I still preferred Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse and the like. But when you guys came along and did what you did on Cruelty, and to a lesser extent Dusk, it just broke it open for a whole bunch of fans. The T-shirts are on display all the way through the 90s. How many Cradle of Filth T-shirts were purchased in the 90s? You guys were the metal band. So I'll wrap up my point here, which is that Danny could have at least acknowledged your contribution and asked you to contribute liner notes, maybe some in-studio photographs and the like for the Remistressed edition. And do you have an opinion, therefore, on the way that he conducted the Remistressed version, i.e., do you agree with his philosophy behind it, that the drum sound was responsible for the way, or was the catalyst, if you like, for the remistressing, and would you have done anything different?
Well, when I heard the original mix, I actually burst into tears. I was on the phone to the record label saying, you cannot release this. This has to be remixed. And back then, in the 90s, when, people actually bought records, record labels, they'd throw stupid amounts of money at bands, to record an album. And because Dusk and Embrace was such a success, it meant that the follow-up album would be an even greater studio advance. So we were pretty much living in the studio for like 3 months, renting a house in Birmingham. The Napalm Death guys, Benediction guys, everybody around there every night, till dawn. Just like, it was like the young one's house. It was just a party. And looking back now, how budgets and the whole industry's changed. I can't believe how much money bands, not just Cradle, but all bands back then, how much money you used to waste in the studio, like, because there was the money to do it, like spending 2 days on a snare drum sound, when your studio's like £800 a day, you know what I mean? And then it just gets replaced with a trigger anyway.
Yeah.
But the thing is, with the original version of Cruelty is, Stuart probably elaborated on it a little bit too. We went with a guy. See, at the time, Therion had just released their album Tomega. Was it Tomega Therion? What was it called?
Theli was the album back then.
Yes. And we absolutely loved that. We thought it was great. The operatics on it and everything. And it was Danny that wanted to use this guy. I wanted to use Peter Tatgren or Andy Sneap.
Perfect. Yeah.
Phil flat out refused to use Andy Sneap because he'd already worked with Cruelty Enthroned, which was kind of like, I wouldn't say our rivals, but John, the lead vocalist of Cruelty Enthroned, he was the bass player in Cradle of Filth for a while. And when he quit Cradle, he went to form Cruelty Enthroned, and because his vocal style was very reminiscent of Danny's, Danny kind of got a bee in his bonnet about it, and so he didn't want to use Andy Sneap. And management had a problem with Peter Tatgren, which I don't know why. I mean, they take 20% and sit behind a desk, and so we went with the Therion guy, Jan Peter Genkel, I think his name was, and he just fucked it up royally. Excuse my French. But it was an absolute disappointment. I couldn't believe the drum sound. I actually said to the guys, I'm going to run a fucking magnet across the master tapes. This cannot be released. And lo and behold, New Music for Nations released it, and it did really well. But I just remember all of the reviews saying how bad the sound was, and it really didn't do the songs justice, because I still have the rehearsal tapes from the Dusk and Cruelty sessions, and if you hit the rehearsal jams, you'd be like, oh my god, even like a boombox with a tape press record in the middle of the room, it sounded way much better and had way more atmosphere than how the album actually turned out. And I appreciate that fans, because that's the only way they know this album.
Sure.
So they look for what it is. But me, from a creative point, and knowing how the rehearsal tapes sounded and the demos and everything we did, it was a huge disappointment for me. And things were already going kind of south with me and Filth at the time. And it was the last tour of the year in 1998 with Napalm Death and Bought Nagar in Europe. The first date of the tour, me and Barney switched buses. I went to the Napalm Death bus, and he went to the Cradle bus, because it was the first bus in Europe to have a PS2 at the time, and he was all into gaming. So it was a mutual trade-off. And then after that tour, I decided to quit.
Yeah, and the band, frankly, has never recovered, in many people's opinion. Mine, especially mine. You and Stuart leaving was a death knell for that band.
Well, I left first, and it was Les and Stuart were the ones that left 6 months later. But I wish we would have all left together, and then we could have audited the band, because there was a lot of discrepancies and everything.
Yes, I can imagine that'd be the case. And just going back to the remistress version of Cruelty and the Beast again. You mentioned there, and this was something that Stuart had brought up, that there were demo recordings. There were also rehearsal recordings. Man, as a fan of that album, a dyed-on-the-wall fan of that album, I would dearly love to hear some of that stuff. And that was the missed opportunity there with the remixing and the remastering and the re-releasing, the remistressing. That's what Danny should have done. He should have reached out to you guys, let bygones be bygones, and said, listen, let's just do this for the fans.
Absolutely, but it wasn't to be. And all it would have took was a little bit of dialogue between us. What do you think to the mixers? I mean, it's basically all vocals still.
Yeah.
And there's so many things wrong with it. And if you A/B it next to the original, the guitar tone is way thinner. The kick and snare are better, but the toms are buried. The keyboards have lost all of their atmosphere, and it's just it's just like vocals and backing music to me. It could have been mixed a lot better.
So when you were recording the drums, what was tracked first? Were the drums tracked first with the demo guitars over the top?
Yeah, usually how it happens is drums always go first, and you record to a click track with a guide guitar, and then once the drums are done, then you start building up everything else on top of it.
So when were you first? When was it first apparent to you when you got the final mix before it's sent away to mastering? Is that when you first heard it and went, oh shit, or was it well before then?
No, I heard what was to be the definitive mix, because we were in the studio for like 3 months, and it's a really long time. Once you've done your parts, you don't really have to be there. But because I'm quite a hands-on guy, and that music was mine. The music was mine and Les's and Stuart's.
Yeah.
I had to be hands-on to make sure, everything was how it was. And I left for some reason. I don't know what it was. I think I just had enough of being in the studio. And when I got home and I got what was to be the final mix, I literally burst into tears. I couldn't believe it. I was like, all the money we've spent on this, and that's how it sounds.
Wow.
Are you fucking kidding me? We could have spent half the money and gone to Peter Tägtgren in Sweden. But it's band politics, bad management, egos, etc.
For a brief period of time there, upon that album's release, because Metallica had shat themselves, Megadeth were about to shit themselves, Slayer were pretending to be punks, Cradle of Filth were the biggest heavy metal band, and certainly the most important heavy metal band in the world. Did you get that feeling inside of the band yourselves that this is it, guys? We could potentially, because you were the new wave of Iron Maiden, effectively. That's how I saw you, as someone who's into Iron Maiden. I just saw you guys as the natural successor. Steve had handed the torch to yourself and Stuart in a way you were supposed to go, but it just never quite happened.
That's kind of. We were really the Maiden thing is really it's very evident on the Cruelty album, more so than the previous releases. And I thought it was great. I loved that direction. And like you said, Maiden at the time, I think they had wasn't Blaze in the
Bailey.
band, so
and Iron Maiden shit themselves too.
Yeah. I mean, we were playing bigger places than Maiden in some countries.
Yes,
at that time.
I remember that.
Maiden, and it was great. I mean, everything just happened so fast. It was, looking back now, and we were young. We were only in our mid-20s, and we were living our childhood dream. And everything was happening so fast. We were on. The BBC wanted to make a documentary about us. We had to play live in the studio for MTV, and overseas, like live on French TV, etc., etc. On the European tours, it was like absolute chaos, because most of like Amsterdam, you've got a signing session at Tower Records before soundcheck. Paris, another signing session, photo shoot. It was just bang, 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 bang. And I think because we were young and naive, and we just. We took it all in our strides, but we kind of, we didn't really behave ourselves, if you like. I mean, we were the biggest black metal band, and all the Norwegians, the Scandinavians hated us. They talked so much shit in the press about us. And we were like, well, they're burning churches and killing people, but we're the bigger band. We need to play up on this. And so we kind of adopted like this kind of black metal hooligan attitude, everything in excess. There was always somebody in hospital or getting arrested or some crazy shit, and we were just, playing on it because we're we're the big boys and we can do what the fuck we want, you know. And at the same time, when your career's just like climbing and climbing by month after month, you know, it's very easy to get carried away, you know, and like being young and naive, you can kind of see, looking back now, there's loads of things I'd do totally different, you know. But yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't change anything for the world. It is what it is.
Yeah, the only thing myself and a lot of other fans would change is that you stayed in the band. And I mean, as I say, you've practically recorded on on Extreme Metal's greatest hits since. But I feel, and I'm writing a book about this. One of the key reasons that I reached out to you is because I am writing a book, and you're in it. Because this album is so important. What I hope to do long term with yourself, Les, and Stuart is actually write a book about your experiences with Cradle. That's how important I think the album is, and I will dedicate the time to that if that's something you're keen on doing. Because
absolutely, mate, absolutely.
I think people need to understand in the fullness of time. I'm going to make a very broad statement or a big statement here and say that I think when it's all said and done, in 50 and 60 years' time, in the same way that we go back and revere some of the work of the Beatles and the like, Led Zeppelin's early material, we'll be doing that with Cradle of Filth's most important material. It's part of a pantheon of work that I think, alongside of Nemesis Divina from Satyricon and the like, if these albums don't happen, black metal doesn't evolve in the way that it has.
Yeah.
It might have evolved, sure, but the key thing with yourself coming in and your drumming technique, that's been copied many times over. So surely to goodness you've heard your own drumming in your headphones when you've been listening to other bands, because you've got your own inimitable techniques and people have copied them. So please tell me, because I can hear some bands that I think that's happening.
Well,
so
you know, imitation is the ultimate flattery, isn't it? So they say. I think it's great. I mean, you know, I'm old school. You know, I learned to play drums listening to Phil Rudd. Phil Rudd to me is like one of the greatest drummers ever in the world. You know, you've got these young kids now that like half my age. You know, they can play like 320 beats BPM. You know, it's literally a blur, but there's no artistic merit to it. You know, there's no soul. It's soulless. You know, play a 4/4 rock beat like Phil Rudd. That's got soul. That's got feeling. You know, and just how drums, how the whole, what I call the drum Olympics, how it's become nowadays. Like modern death metal and shit like that. It's not about the riffs anymore. It's just basically how fast your drummer can go. You know, and it's like after 30 seconds of hearing a typewriter, it's fucking boring.
Absolutely.
You know?
I can't tell you how many albums I get through like that. Yeah.
Oh, mate, it's terrible. I mean, you know, I'm an old fart now. I'm almost 50 years old. You know, for me, death metal is Pestilence, Consuming Impulse, Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness, you know, Entombed, Left Hand Path.
Yes.
You know, Tomb of the Mutilated. You know what I'm saying? Leveling Creation, the Ten Commandments.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, Deicide.
I was going to say Deicide Legion. The first, yeah, I get you.
Know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's just how the whole extreme music's evolved. I'm really out of touch. You know. But I'm very flattered that, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that, you know, give me props and say, you know, they're inspired by me. It's great. I mean, I'm pretty much, I stole everything pretty much from Gene Hoglan and Neil Peart.
Gene's a nice guy,
and just put it into a black metal context, you know.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, if you listen to the drums, it really is just Gene Hoglan and Neil Peart, but played in a black metal context. You know, and I think that's what gave... Yeah. I think that's what gave the songs and my drums like a bit more flavour, made it a little bit more musical.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for people like myself who revere Cruelty and the Beast as it was recorded, and to your earlier point, we would never know what happened behind the scenes as the album was presented. I remember I had I don't know whether they were in the UK, but a Suzuki Swift back in the day in the mid '90s, and you know, little 4-cylinder, you know, probably wasn't even a litre capacity engine, so it suffered through the Australian summers, let me assure you. But I remember putting in a I think about $1,500 stereo system into it, a pretty bloody good one, worth more than the car practically.
And yeah.
I remember going into the city and buying Cruelty and the Beast and putting it into the car, and boom, it just hit me. And one of the things that I think the album in its original format has got going for it, it is so unique and so standalone, as flawed as you, as a creator of the album, might have thought on prior to its release that it made it unique for those reasons. It was all part of the rich tapestry of what makes the album a standalone, and I think that's one of the other reasons why we've never heard another album sound like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there's no other album that sounds like it, because I appreciate, you love this album, but for me, the sound, it just, no, that's not how it was supposed to be. And when I heard the reissued remix thing, it was like, that's not how it's supposed to be either. But
yeah.
Hey, it is what it is.
There's a bit of a thing there, isn't it, with Cradle of Filth on the by far the band's two most important albums, and you're a centrepiece on both. So Dusk and Her Embrace, of course, was re-released too. What was it called? It was called The Original Sin. But you recorded on both versions, yeah. And Danny told me that your drums are the same on both. So is that the case?
Yes. The drums are the only original. That's the only original thing left. Because what happened was the re-release of Dusk, that was the original master tape. That was the original tape, and that was supposed to be the second Cradle album. But what happened was we were all broke. We were all like on welfare. We didn't have a pot to piss in. I remember I'd have to like pawn my TV and my games console just to pay my phone bill. And meanwhile, Cacophonous Records, they're signing up everybody, Dimmu Borgir, everyone, Gehenna, and it's all from Cradle of Filth's money, which they haven't paid us. They use they use the money we were owed to build the label.
A Ponzi scheme, yeah.
Yes. So we were in the studio, recorded Dusk, and I just turned around and said, look, if they're not going to pay us, then fuck them, we'll keep the masters, because we have them over a barrel then. Pay us what you owe us, and we'll gladly submit the master tapes. Of course, they didn't. They were stubborn, and a big lawsuit ensued. And then Dusk was the first release on Music for Nations, which was, a big label. And we went in and re-recorded everything apart from the drums.
Your meeting with Kit Wolven, alongside of the introduction of course, you were in the band already, but then Stuart, and then eventually Les. I think Kit is the fourth member of that quartet, if you like, that is responsible for the success of the band overall, because that album to this day sounds massive, especially on vinyl. Dusk and Her Embrace, of course, I'm talking about the version that has Stuart on it. Okay, so Danny's not a musician, to your point, so he wouldn't know, but as one of the musicians, did you feel as though the version with Stuart on it was vastly superior to the version with Paul on it?
Absolutely. It's just there was a lot more clarity. He tweaked some of the parts and just made it his own, and it really, his playing really shines. It was good times. I miss jamming with Stuart.
I think he misses jamming with you too, man. I mean, I was going to save this question for one of my last ones, but I'll mention it now that you bring it up, because we'd love to see the three of you together again. Yourself, Les. I know you're in Anathema with Les, so.
No, I wasn't in Anathema, actually. I played Bloodstock Festival for them, and it was totally on the fly. They were they were playing Bloodstock on the Sunday, and I was at Bloodstock on the Friday with Jeff Walker from Carcass, absolutely shit-faced. And the Kavanagh brothers kept blowing up my phone, and because Jeff is Liverpool, those guys are Liverpool, they've got a history, and the UK scene, everybody knows each other. It's very incestuous. So they're blowing up my phone, and he says, "Hey, you better take it. It might be important." So I take the phone, and they say, "Look, we need you to come up to Leeds now and rehearse for Sunday." It's like, well, I can't. I'm fucked. I can't drive like this. So I'll let me sober up. I'll come first thing in the morning. I drove up to Leeds on Saturday morning. I said to them, right, look, you know, I'm a huge fan, but we're going to have to play the songs that I know the best, because we're only going to get one jam, and then it's straight, you know, the baptism of fire. And so I said, look, let's make it like a bit of a best of set. And it was all the songs that, you know, I knew, and, you know, all the fans loved those songs because I'm a fan myself. Yeah, and it went down. It was one of the best shows of the weekend, apparently. And the funny thing was I'd made loads of cheat sheets prior to the gig, and I've got the cheat sheets on like a music stand next to the drum kit on the stage. They turned the fans on to blow the smoke.
Oh no!
All the fucking cheat sheets just flew away like birds. I'm like, no. So yeah, I was. Luckily, I pulled it off, but it just, you know, I wasn't in my comfort zone at all.
I reckon Vincent. Yeah, I reckon Vincent's one of my favourite all-time musicians as well. I love the work that he's
great.
Done. Yeah, are you good mates with Vincent and Daniel?
Oh, mate, I've known those guys like 30 years. You know, since when they were a death metal band. You know, back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, the demo days. Because I used to have a shitty generic death metal band before Cradle called Monolith, and you know, we all used to play on the same shows together. My band Monolith and Anathema, actually, we were the opening bands for Cannibal Corpse on their very first UK tour on Tomb of the Mutilated.
That would have been a hell of a show to be a part of.
Yeah, and this is when Anathema, you know, was still like kind of like a death metal doom band, you know. But it was a great tour. Yeah, it was good fun. But I've known those guys, 30 years. So
with yourself, Stuart and Les, is there any chance that the three of you could ever get together again musically?
Well, we have actually talked about it. You know, because Les and Stuart have got an entire Cradle album ready to record.
Yes. Can you talk about that for a bit? Because I didn't dive into that with Stuart as much as I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, they got all this music together because when I left. When did I left in January '99, and they left after the summer. And they'd been working on material for what would have been the Midian album. And when they quit, they just took the music with them. They didn't give any of it to Filth.
And this is the Clive Barker concept album, of course, isn't it? The mythical Clive Barker concept album. Yes.
Yeah. Funny story there, actually. I used to bullshit chicks back in my late teens, early 20s. That Clive Barker's my uncle. Yeah. It's, oh really? And you know, I mean, hopefully that's not like some hashtag Me Too shit now. But it worked a couple of times. You know.
That's interesting, isn't it?
But
so you know, you literally want to you on the very sight of you. Like there's only two of you really. There's yourself and Gene Hoglan and maybe Hellhammer, maybe Adrian Erlinson, of course, who was in Cradle of Filth. I think he was a couple of members after you there. But you're literally one of the most recognisable black metal drummers or heavy metal drummers of all time. Yet you got this other story. But of course, that's all happened since then.
Yeah. It's you know, I think being a big dude as well, you know, covered in tattoos. Yeah. You know, I'm fairly outspoken. You know, I like to make people laugh. I'm a bit of a joker, so people kind of remember you, you know.
I can imagine. I can definitely imagine if just for the music alone. But let's just double back a bit again. Oh, actually, I won't. I'll stay on track here because this Clive Barker concept album, Stuart. The first time I'd heard of it is when I spoke to Stuart, and I've had to listen back to that episode a couple of times. The conversation that we had a couple of times, and I realised that it didn't twig how important it was for me to then ask more questions of him about that. So the album's actually done, is it? And it's ready to be, not so much ready to be released, but the basic building blocks of an album are there.
Yeah, I mean, they're not... They're structures. I wouldn't say they're songs because obviously, you know, I'd need to listen to it and give my opinions on, well, maybe you should do this, and if I played this on the drums, that would fit more with that, and maybe that would, yeah, they're structures. I couldn't say if they're like full, complete songs, but I know there is structures ready to go, and all it'll take is like, for us to get into a jam studio for a couple of weeks to, iron out any tweaks, and then it would be good to go. And we have actually talked about it. In fact, almost every time I speak to Stuart or Les, this always comes up, oh, we should fucking get together and do this, for the fans. And, it's like, show the world, what it would have been. And, it's just a question, like, obviously now we're all like 50 years old. We've got kids, that we don't live in the same area anymore. And, it's just a logistic thing. But I can pretty much say it'll happen when it happens. It will happen.
Wonderful.
But, when, who knows? It's going to be one of those times when the stars are aligned. Right, let's hammer this out now.
I think that's one of the things that pisses people like me off so much, is that we've missed out on so much great music with the three of you leaving Cradle. Because, look, Danny's voice is iconic. I've got to give him that. But he's not a musician, so he needs people like yourself around to write the music. And the lineup since, and I've got to say, Paul isn't a patch on Stuart as a guitarist. He just doesn't have an identifiable tone, does he?
Not at all, no. It's, they're like night and day,
How was it for you being in the band with somebody like Stuart out the front? Did it feel a bit like you had Adrian Smith out there? You know what I mean by that? You had somebody out there who had their own...
Well, the thing is like, me, Stuart and Les had this bond, like, on stage and off stage, I mean, we always used to hang out together, we'd smoke weed together, we were friends as well as, musicians, band members. So, because they're so good at what they do, it was a breeze for me as a drummer to play with a guitarist that's solid and articulate, and, he's feeding off me, I'm feeding off him,
Yeah.
He reads what I play and vice versa. So,
yes,
he knows when I'm going to go into a transition, and, vice versa. It's, when you get that chemistry with certain musicians, it's a once in a lifetime thing. I can say that I've had it with a handful of musicians throughout my entire career.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not like that. It can be not a personal struggle, but just like with some musicians, you don't seem to click.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're always like on edge, like, what's he going to do next? And what I mean? There's a certain degree of unpredictability, but when when the chemistry's there with other people and you just click immediately, you really don't have to worry. Everything's kind of on autopilot.
It just happens, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm a musician too, and I've played in not tons, but half a dozen serious cover bands, and God knows how many others I've turned up for, just, the fill-in work, one night here, one night there, that sort of thing. And some musicians you work with, you've watched from the stage, and you're on, and you thought, wow, they're fantastic, and then you get up on stage and perform with them, and you're like, this sucks. And that's what you're alluding to there.
Yeah. So, to work with Les and Stuart, it was really truly a blessing.
Stuart told me this incredibly funny story. It was a meet and greet in Holland on the Dusk tour, and it's about John or Gian. We'll just call him John, I suppose. What do you prefer, John or Gian?
Yeah, it's John. John,
yeah. So Stuart told me that you were at a meet and greet, and Stuart was backstage, and you went out to meet some of the fans, and you caught John mid-brag talking about the solo on Beauty, Slept and Sodom, which of course he didn't do, which was Stuart's, and then you went back and got Stuart, and you really gave him a ribbing in front of these fans, and to which he said, I thought that's what he wanted to hear. and I think if anything summed up someone's contribution, that'd be it there. But do you remember that episode specifically?
I don't remember that specifically, no, because to be honest, There were so many incidents, and it was a long time ago. I mean, I've fried so many brain cells between then and now. So, as you get older, I think your memory starts to get a bit hazy. But John was like that. He'd take credit for shit that he didn't even have anything to do with. He was pretty much a freeloader, and that's where resentment and everything started to kick in because, me, Les, and Stuart, we're the sole contributors here, but you're getting paid the same as us. Surely that's not right. And so there's a lot of politics and shit involved, and resentment started kicking in. I mean, there's a lot of bad management, and Filth was all a part of it as well. I mean, we were selling out 1,500 to 2,000 capacity venues in Europe, which were probably on a back end deal after break even as well. And we rode in at the shittiest tour bus you can imagine, very basic crew, and we were only coming home with merch profit. So where's all the money going? And of course, when I questioned management about this, I was accused of rocking the boat, and nobody else wants to see the accounts, Nick, so why do you? Why do you always have to make trouble? Yeah. And that was the red flag that said, you know what, you're all fucked, I'm out of here. And 2 days later, I was in Dimmu Borgir.
I remember. Yeah, I don't remember. I certainly remember you appearing on the album because back then, of course, the internet wasn't the behemoth that it is these days. But there was an interview. I can't remember who it was with. It might have been with Metal Hammer or Kerrang or Terrorizer, one of them anyway. It was a British mag anyway, I remember. And Les uttered the immortal line, "What does Danny want? Danny and the Filths?" I remember it was Les who said that.
Yeah, pretty much that was it. That's the way it was going. I mean, when management got involved, they saw, okay, we've got like an English Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson figure here that we can market and mold, and and the band is expendable. It was all, and that's when he changed his name to Danny Filth. It was just like, oh fuck, I know exactly where this is going, and with all the mismanagement, and there was no transparency with anything. Well, I know where all the money was going, but I just couldn't prove it.
Is that right?
And,
so
if me and Les and Stuart would have quit at the same time, we're all on the same page. I would have instigated auditing Cradle of Filth from the management, see where all the money's gone, because there was thousands. I mean, we were the biggest band, and we're riding in a shitty tour bus that fucking breaks down every 200 kilometers with a minimum crew, and we're selling out 1,500 to 2,000 capacity venues. Why am I only coming home with merchandise profit? Alarm bells are ringing.
Who owns the brand IP then back then? Okay, so obviously Danny owns it now, but back in those days, I imagine the three of you had a pretty bloody good case moving forward to take the name with you.
I wouldn't have wanted the name, because I'm not that type of person. I'm just a straight up guy. All I want is what I'm owed and what's legally mine. And clearly things aren't right. There's no transparency. There was a lot of lies and contradictions, and I just didn't want to be a part of that anymore. And how management was, manipulating Danny into this UK Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson figure. It just all went to his head. I mean,
that's so true. Yeah. On the Marilyn Manson photos and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, he was getting the shit kicked out of him, like left, right, and centre by stage crews, security, because he'd be on stage and he'd kick a monitor at some 7-foot security dude in front of him. And it's just like that kind of bullshit. It falls on me too. Not just him. It's like we all get tarred with that same brush. Now, none of us were perfect, but we didn't go around acting like divas, like I need this and the ice isn't cold enough and blah blah blah. We as long as we got a bit of weed and there's some booze, we're good. You know, and that was pretty much it. I'm sure Les or Stuart would tell you the same thing. But it was a very divided camp. You know, it was him, and then there was me, Stuart, and Les, and you know,
what about
the other two?
What about since though? Yeah, I could read between the lines even back then that Rob and John weren't they weren't integral members, if you like. They're just sort of just there.
Yeah, pretty much. It was a very, very, very split, divided camp. I mean, like I said, the last European tour in November, December '98 was with Napalm Death and Borgir, and on the very first day, I went straight to the Napalm Death bus and said, "I'm not rolling on the Cradle bus." I'd had enough by that time.
Has Danny reached out to you in the intervening years at all?
No, he wouldn't reach out to me. I mean, you know, our paths have crossed at festivals and stuff. You know, and he's overly nice to me. But it's like, you know, I don't like the guy and I don't respect him because, you know, he fucked us all over. And, you know, there's thousands and thousands of pounds unaccountable for, you know, and I'm not a greedy person. I just want my slice of the pie, you know. And the thing is, if he'd have done the right thing, we'd have probably stayed with him, you know, but he didn't. So, you know, he broke up the band and the band's never been the same since.
I don't know how else I can frame this, but do you think Danny was jealous of the band's success? Does that make sense? Did he want the success all for himself and not for the band?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, he wanted us to all... Well, after I left, Les and Stuart told me that he wanted all the members to sign NDA clauses.
Oh, shit. Yeah, wow.
You know, so nobody could talk shit about him. We couldn't discuss any Cradle of Filth business or anything. And like, if I was in the band and you know that was submitted to me, I'd have told him to go and fuck himself. You know, they're already there. You see, why do we need this? You know, it's you know, red flags are popping up everywhere. You know, oh, we've got to sign like contracts now that, you know, we can't say this, we can't do that. Fuck that, you know.
Yeah, that's fucking odd, mate.
I think
that's
and I think that's why, you know, there's been an ever revolving door with band members because, you know, you got to look at it like, you know, you got like these young musicians from like Eastern Europe that could only dream of being in a band like Cradle of Filth. You know, pay them €100 a night, they live like kings back home. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much the gist of things, you know. And yeah. I could go on even more because I'm still really good friends with a lot of their crew from the past, and some of the stories, I mean, are just absolutely, you can't believe it, you know.
I bet. And look, I've spoken to, I know Lindsay's out of the band now, but I've had a conversation with her, all for the podcast, by the way. I don't know anybody. It's only the catalyst for my introduction is because of an interview for the podcast. But Lindsay and Richard, they say Richard Shaw, that is the guitarist who was Stuart's replacement, about 17 times removed, of course, due to the volume of guitarists that the band has had. But they seem like pretty switched on people. So all I can think is that particularly in Richard, in Richard's case, because he's still in the band, it's very much like the deal that Dave Mustaine even... have you heard about the deal that Dave Mustaine gave to David Ellison to come back into the band? I mean, I've only...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, and I better not air other people's laundry, but you know what I mean. Like, it seems like it's sign here, this is it. If you don't like it, don't do it. Fuck off.
It's pretty much, you know, industry standard with a lot of people. I mean, the same thing with Michael Anthony with Van Halen. You know, they said, you know, if you want in, then you have to give up your rights to the name and your share of your 25%.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's happened everywhere, you know, and it's what I hate about the fucking music industry. You know, it's almost like transparency and honesty is almost a taboo sometimes. You know,
it's seen as a weakness is what I notice.
Yeah, and because I'm an outspoken guy, if I smell bullshit, I'll call bullshit. And that's just how I am. I'm straight up. What you see is what you get. I'm one of the most genuine, honest guys you could work with.
And I get that impression. Yeah.
I don't understand why people have to be greedy and lie.
Well, I tell you what, mate. In my 42 years, it's one of the reasons that I was born a Catholic, raised a Catholic. There's got to be a reason that there are so many fucking assholes are out there, and it's one of the reasons I ended up at Krishna consciousness as an aspiring devotee. So there's nobody who's a Krishna devotee would call themselves that. They call themselves aspiring devotees. But I still eat meat and do a lot of the things that aren't quite integral to being an aspiring devotee. But one of the key things that drew me into the faith was they talk about living in this age of iron and fire, Kali Yuga. We're basically in between heaven and hell, which is why you get people like yourself who have stand-up characters who just want to do the right thing, and then you get other people who want to take advantage of the people doing the right thing, because it's really the story of humanity, not just now, but right back to antiquity and even further back, because, of course, we can't possibly know. All history is an obfuscation. All textbooks are bullshit. Like Graham Hancock talks about, the pyramids and the sphinxes being tens of thousands of years older than what the textbooks say they are. And my point there is that we've been fucking rotten for a lot longer than what we actually give ourselves credit, or maybe not so much credit for, if you know what I'm saying. And we, our evolution seems to rely on people fucking other people over, and it's just ridiculous, because just in our little, corner of the world here, extreme metal, Cradle of Filth, my ultimate view is that we were denied one of the greatest bands in history because of Danny's attitude, and now, as I understand it, management with you guys, the three of you being forced out of the band for the reasons that you were. And I'll go even further and say that, life's tough. Life's long. People suffer anxiety, depression, family breakdowns, relationship breakdowns for no reason whatsoever. Some people can just be driving along in their car and holy shit, they just feel like the whole world's coming in at them. Music is one of the cornerstones of people's existences because it nourishes our spirit and our emotional well-being. Do you understand?
Absolutely.
I know it's a broad point to make, man, but I mean, it's so important to make that.
I agree 100%.
And I think that, with people like yourself, it's so important, Nick, that you keep on doing what you're doing. And one of the key reasons I wanted to reach out to you, and as I did with Stuart, was just to, and I'm sure you speak to people like myself, where the music that you've been a part of has had such an integral impact on our lives. It's as important as a human relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way about, the music I love, and what it means to me. And it's really flattering, and it really gives me a sense of pride that, people like yourself talk about music that I've made in such high regard. It's I'm a manic depressive, so it's hard for me sometimes to accept the compliments, and hard for me to understand that people feel this way about something that I did, depending on where my mood is, determines how I accept it and how I deal with it. But I'm kind of embarrassed,
No, so I think
I kind of get shy and like, oh, thanks, when people give me compliments.
Well, it's important that I think you hear that, because in your lesser moments, mate, please, remember those words, because they're not just mine, by the way. I've got people all over the world reaching out to me, as I mentioned, and it will happen because of this episode too, once I release it. But the Stuart episode, and it's easily, I get more communication, not just listens, but more to that podcast episode, but more communication about that episode. Okay, so it's had a tremendous, mate, people from Latin America. I mean, a lot of these people, mate, don't have much of their lives, if you know what I'm saying, in terms of access to material goods.
I've toured Latin America several times because of my involvement with Brujeria, and I've been. We played everywhere in Central America, South America, Mexico. Dominican Republic. We played Puerto Rico. And when you see how worthless life is there, you know, like you know, for instance, in Colombia, cocaine's cheaper than a McDonald's Happy Meal. You know, how can that be? You know, and there's kids living on the streets, like passed out, and that you can see like drug paraphernalia next to them, and it's horrible. It's, you know, when it makes you realise just how lucky we are and how fortunate we are, and despite, you know, how much we bitch and moan about how our lives are, you know, it's fucking horrible down there. So, you know, when people down there, compliment you and you get adulation from fans down there, they're very passionate. It's a totally different world. I mean, I had one fan, I can't remember where it was, I think it was somewhere in Brazil. He pulled a 357 out and said he'd kill someone for me.
Jesus.
You know, that's how fucking crazy it is down there. And I shat myself. I thought he was going to shoot me.
Yeah.
You know, but he said, you know, you are God. You know, you are my God. You know, I will fucking kill someone for you. It's like, nah, it's cool.
Yeah, that's devotion.
Yeah, but it's scary too. You know, it's crazy. You know, and yeah, I got robbed at gunpoint in Sao Paulo as well, which wasn't very good. Yeah, two dudes on a motorcycle. We're in the shittiest part of town because obviously that's where the cheapest hotels are. And I'd gone out to get some food, and yeah, this motorbike mounted the sidewalk. Dude on the back had a gun in my face, and he just said money. I gave him my wallet, and they fucked off in the night. I've never been so scared in my life.
It's very confronting for us coming from countries like the UK and Australia, when that is the daily reality of many people, isn't it? And we don't know which areas are more dangerous than others.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, life is meaningless there. It's worthless, you know. And when I look back on the situation, I gave him my wallet, but the only thing I was bothered about, I didn't give a fuck about the money. It just had photos of my kids when they were little and Post-it notes that they'd written to me, like, you know, have a good time on tour, Daddy. Come home soon. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Shit like that I'll never get back again. You know, I mean, hopefully with the money they bought the biggest bag of heroin they could find and they fucking OD'd. But yeah, it's crazy. They could have shot me. They could have took the wallet and then shot me. Or what if I didn't have any money on me and they shot me? You know, and you know, the next day when it's lobby call, we got to fly to the next city. You know, my band are like in the lobby. Where's Barker? Where the fuck's Barker? He's not in his room. You know, you know, I'm in a morgue somewhere. It's crazy shit, man. It's right. The whole gunpoint thing. It really scarred me for a long time. You know.
Yeah, I can tell. You know, for people listening, of course, you know, you and I can see each other because we're on Skype. But yeah, I mean, I've never had that happen. But I think you only have to have that happen to you once before it's easily. Did you have that? I hope you don't mind me asking questions about this, by the way, before I do. So stop.
Not at all.
But did you have that
Fire
moment?
Away, it's all good.
Did you have that moment where your life sort of flashed before your eyes, and as the people talk about the cliche? Again, I hope you don't mind me calling it the cliche.
It wasn't.
Thing.
You know what, mate? It happened so fast. You know, when I look back at it now and remember it, it's kind of in slow motion when I remember it now. But at the time, it was so fucking fast, and I was like, it was almost like it wasn't real, like it wasn't happening. Like the motorcycle mounted the sidewalk, he pulled the gun on me, the passenger on the back. He said money, and I was kind of like, I was almost in shock. Like I just, you know, like you're hypnotized or something. I just gave him the wallet, and then they fucking sped off. And like for a few seconds, I was like, did that really happen? And then the shock hit me, and I remember just running for my life back to the hotel, and I was like shaking like a leaf, and
the adrenaline
telling
kicked
the guys, I was fucking trembling. I was like, I've just been fucking robbed at gunpoint. they pulled a fucking gun on me. He stuck it in my fucking face, and I was almost in tears. And they calmed me down and said, right, first things first, you've got to contact your bank, cancel all your cards, blah 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 blah. At the end of the day, it's only money. You're still here. That's what you got to remember. They could have fucking shot you just for the fun of it. And it's, so after I'd calmed down and that, it's like, okay, yeah, you're right, it's only money, but it's money that I need to pay my bills when I get home. And, blah, blah, blah. But, out of a gesture of good faith, the guys had a bit of a whip round for me. So, I went home with something.
Was that Dimmu?
Which was,
that with Dimmu or Brujeria?
That was, no, Brujeria.
Yeah.
So it's like really stand-up guys, they had a bit of a whip round for me and said, look, we can't see you go home broke. Here's a little something that we've all chipped in. And that was cool of them.
You've got a Brujeria T-shirt on right now, so that's a band that you consider, mate. Yeah, that's like a band of brothers, and a sister too, I take it.
Yes, Jess. She's my little sis. Yeah, she's great. I just heard, actually, because they're just finishing up the vocals on the new album now, and I just heard Jessica's song, and she fucking destroys on it. It's like, whoa. I mean, she's up there with Max Cavalera, Anselmo. She's got the pipes.
Absolutely. There's a YouTube clip of her out there and her band. I can't remember what the name of the band was, from about 5 years ago or so. And holy shit, yeah, you're right. I mean, she's right up there with what's White Gloves. What's her first name? Sorry, from Arch Enemy. Sorry, I can't remember now. I've spoken to her.
Is it Alyssa?
Alyssa. I was going to say Angela. Angela Gossow is the original singer, and not the original, but was before her. Yeah, she's right up there in terms of that, in terms of stage presence as well.
Absolutely, she's great. It's such a great thing to have her on board, and she loves Brujeria, and so it's great. And she's just one of the lads, like on tour. There's no bullshit, because sometimes, with women on tour, understandably, you have to make, you have to compromise and things, because there's a female. But with Jess, I mean, she's like, nah, just treat me like one of the guys. I'm cool.
And she's married to somebody in Meshuggah, isn't she?
I don't know if she's married. I think they're engaged. Thomas, the drummer.
Yeah.
And so she lives in Sweden now. She's just got a Swedish residency, so she's all happy about that. And she's just itching to get back out on the road with us. She's great. I mean, she's a great girl. I mean, she puts up with all our farts and everything on the bus, and she's just cool. She's one of the boys,
Yeah, I can only imagine what it'd be like touring in a band like Brujeria, and the shenanigans that the band collectively would get up to.
Yeah, it's it's fun. Yeah, we have a good time.
Let me ask you this then. As a 16-year-old, way back in the day, early 90s, late 80s, did you ever think it was possible? I mean, you're almost 50 to your point earlier in the conversation. You have led an extraordinary life, and your career, I mean, it's just astonishing, really, your career credits. Did you think it was even remotely possible?
No, this is, I've said this to some of my local friends here. Like, if someone would have told me back when I was 13 or 14, and I've got posters of Exodus, Nuclear Assault, Slayer, Possessed, Dark Angel, all the shit, the usual teen stuff. If somebody would have told me back then that one day you're going to play in Exodus, you're going to play in Testament, you're going to play in Nuclear Assault, you're going to play in Possessed, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. What the fuck? I'm just some like dropout, some high school dropout kid, mate, from a working class bullshit town in the middle of England. It's a million miles from the Bay Area, and it's a trip. Sometimes I do like have to take a breath and think, wow, yeah, it's what a journey,
For
I feel.
Right, sorry, you go.
Sorry, go on.
Oh well,
I feel truly honoured and blessed that I got to live my childhood dream.
for a self-described, I'm paraphrasing here, unschooled drummer, you've done extraordinary things, and I think it's people like yourself that prove to people that you don't need to spend 4 years at a conservatorium in order to carve out a career as a musician. You've just got to have passion. You've got the chops. God, no, Jesus Christ, you've got the chops. There's no doubt about that. But you're a born drummer. I think you're a born musician. You're someone who was put here to do that. So eventually you would have found a way to success.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I had a really shitty childhood, and my stepfather, he was a guitarist, and he had great taste in music, but he was an absolute arsehole. And he kind of forced the guitar on me from, I think I was like about 8 years old. Despite me, I want a drum kit. I want a drum kit. Please get me a drum kit. I'll wash the car for the next 1,000 years. I'll mow the lawn. I'll do the yard. Just get me a drum kit, please. And he forced the guitar on me. I didn't take to it. It's not me, And in between the guitar shit, I remember playing on the pots and pans and always tapping. And I could air drum. That's another thing that Gene Hoglan said the same thing. Like, he was the best air drummer there was, and yeah, I could air drum. So when I got a drum kit, it really didn't take me long. I mean, I got the drum kit. It was a piece of shit, but I loved it. It was mine, and I just put the headphones on. I don't know if you remember the old 70s style Mickey Mouse style with the curly phone cord.
Yeah, the
those
pig
kind
cord,
of things.
pigtail, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember the first, I played Highway to Hell, and after about 30 seconds, I got the gist of the 4/4, basic 4/4 rock beat. And then I carried on playing along to AC/DC for a couple of months. And within 6 months, I was playing along to Metallica.
Lars Ulrich, bloody good old
not the
Lars
double
Ulrich.
bass shit.
Yeah.
But, I'd mastered how to play off beats with my kick drum, which was that was a really big achievement when I learned to play an off beat. The dun dun, the extra kick.
Sure.
So that made the Metallica stuff even easier to play. And then I got my first double bass kit when I was 17. I started playing when I was 13. I got my first double bass kit that my foster parents bought me. But at this time I was in foster care. And they bought me the double bass kit, and it just went on from there.
Things obviously at home were very difficult for you then.
Oh, yeah. It's the typical thing. The stepdad was a wanker, resented the fact that he had to raise a kid that wasn't his. And, my old man wasn't sending any child support, so that made it hard. And, it basically, it was taken out on me.
Jesus.
But, it is what it is. I mean, everything happens for a reason. And, if the circumstances in my childhood didn't happen, I might not be here today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only way. I know what you're saying. Yeah, my upbringing too was I was shipped off to a boarding school very young too. So, in a lot of ways, when I often say to people, when you move out of home at 25, I did it when I was 12, and
yeah, mate, I did it at 14, mate. Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, and it's just it forces you to either put up or shut up. And I've got to say, I was a pretty timid kid. I shut up a lot of the time because I'd seen. I can talk about this a little bit. The boarding school I went to was one of those ones where there's a recommendation into a commission for sexual assault. And this was boys on boys, by the way. It wasn't teachers on boys. This is shit that was going on. All these big, tough, burly fuckheads from the Australian bush, mate, as soon as they saw some timid kid from the city or from an urban area, mate, some of the things that would go on there. And I've got to say, it didn't happen to me, but it was going on around me. And it does scar you, I've got to say.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I had nothing like that happen to me. All my abuse was physical and mental. My mother's abuse was mental. Mm-hmm. She was probably undiagnosed, like fucking whatever. But back then, those medical conditions didn't exist. I was basically born to a 16-year-old single mother out of wedlock in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was very much frowned upon back then. You know, but like I say, you know, fuck it. It's like everything happens for a reason. If things in my childhood, in my younger years didn't happen, I probably wouldn't be here today. You just don't know.
Mm.
You know, so.
Yeah. Was there any sliding doors moment then for you within your career? Because of course Cradle is the big one, but you've mentioned Testament, Exodus. Was there a seriously well-known band that said, "Look, Nick, we need you to come on board. You're the guy for us"? And you went, "No, I don't think so."
No. It's been more the other way round, where we'd really like you on board, but we've heard all the horror stories. You know, we've heard you can be unpredictable, you know, impulsive, you know, and you know, you're a bit of a party animal. I mean, but it's like, you know yourself, like, you know, we've all heard anecdotes and stories about different musicians, and they did that. By the time it's done the fucking rounds and come back to you, you know, there's no truth in it whatsoever, because it's been so exaggerated. And but yeah, because we were kind of hooligans in Cradle, it did kind of tarnish, you know, my name. And it has, you know, I'd say it has cost me a few choice gigs in the past. You know, I was in line to do the Carcass reunion.
Oh wow, yeah.
Jeff Walker approached me at Download Festival in 2005, and his exact words were, quote unquote, "Would you be up for doing the Carcass reunion?" Yeah, of course I fucking would, but you've got to behave yourself. And it's like, where's that come from? You've heard some bullshit rumours about me, and all right, so yeah, there was the one time I hung Danny Filth out of a hotel window in the States. That story has kind of been an albatross around my neck, you know. But if he wasn't such a cunt, I wouldn't have hung him out the window. It's pretty straightforward, you know. There was a reason for it, you know, but no one tends to ask, well, why did you do that? You know, well, here's why, you know. And yeah, I'd say some of the excessive behaviour and everything in the past, it's had a bit of a negative impact on, you know, I've lost out on a lot of good gigs, basically, like life-changing gigs. But, you know, it is what it is, mate. You know, it's like, you know, would I have been happy in that band? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. You know, but, yeah, I've got no regrets, really. You know,
I think to your point, though, it's all just a matter of, I do think, maybe because I'm a musician too, maybe I think I understand this better than most people, but in the music industry I do think you've got to be a fatalist, because there are so many sliding doors moments to that point where you really want something to happen, and you've probably had this happen where you've really wanted something to happen, then it happens and it fucking sucks, and you're like, man, this should be so much better than what it is. And after a few of those episodes, and God knows in my tiny little, you know, thing here in Queensland and the covers scene that I'm a part of, I have had a few of those things happen. Like, I really want to play with this guy, and then you get up on stage with them and they're total cunts. You know, you want to talk about the football scores between sets, and they're complaining that your bass is too loud or something, and you're like, just chill.
Yeah. Funny you should mention the covers thing. So I'm a huge AC/DC fan. They're my first love. You know, Bon Scott is he's God to me. And I did have a AC/DC tribute band here called Sin City, and we got the tribute scene in the UK is very bitchy. There's a few DC covers bands, and you know that the members tend to flip flop between each one, but there's a lot of cattiness and bitchiness, you know.
Same here, mate. Don't worry. Exactly the same here.
And anyway, just bear with me. I just get a glass of water.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. We built up a really good reputation, you know, on the tribute scene. I mean, you know, my Angus, geez, he sound. If you close your eyes, it was like listening to Angus. And because he's so small, with the uniform on and the hair, it's like, oh my God. And you know, the dude we had as Bon, he nailed it. He even used to speak in an Aussie accent. in between the songs.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, like Bond, and it was fucking great, you know. And so we had a showcase gig in Manchester, this big, like, live venue that they only do tribute bands. You know, I think the Australian Pink Floyd played there, you know, fucking 20, 30 years ago or whatever. So, yeah, it's a showcase gig, and the manager of the UK's biggest Led Zeppelin tribute, Let's Zepp, they had a O2, they had a UK tour booked, all O2 venues, so it's all legit, proper stuff. And they needed a good tribute band to open. He'd heard that we were one of the best AC/DC bands. Anyway, fast forward, my singer decides to get fucking shit-faced, right? During the first set, he's pissed and he's necking the fucking booze.
Wow.
So by the end of the first set, he's fucking lit. The second set was an absolute disaster. The guy left, you know, and it's like, do you realise what you've just cost us? You know, even if we wouldn't have got the Led Zeppelin tour, we're on this guy's radar now.
Yep.
And, you know, he's going to be looking out for us. You know, he might even want to take us on. And, yeah, he totally fucked it up, and I ended up ripping a door off the hinges and trying to beat him with it.
Don't blame you for an opportunity like that. But that's what happens, though. You know.
Yeah, mate. It's, we put so much effort and time into it, you know. Like, we rehearse 3 times a week. You know, the attention to detail was everything. I mean, you know, they even joked. They even used to call me Phil Pud, you know. And,
yeah.
But I said, well, you call me Phil Pud, but don't call me Simon Wrong.
Yeah.
So,
actually,
yeah.
What do you think of the of Power Up? I actually quite enjoyed it.
Mate, I love it. It's the fucking best thing they've done in, like, since Razor's Edge.
Thank you. I said exactly the same thing in a review. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everything I love about AC/DC, except Malcolm's not there and Bon. The riffs, it took me back. It made me feel like I was a kid again. You know, everything I love about AC/DC is on this record. You know, except for Malcolm and Bon, obviously. But the riffs, it's just got such a great early 80s vibe, you know. Like Witch's Spell, that could easily be off for those about to rock. You know, it's a fucking great album. I mean, the moment I got it on my iTunes, I was like, wow, I felt like a kid again. You know, and to be honest, mate, with how shit this year's been, the new AC/DC album is the best thing to happen in 2020 for me.
I've heard that a lot, man. Yeah, I Razor's Edge was the first album that I bought. So for me, that's the template, if you like. And I've played a ton of AC/DC stuff over the years, because playing covers in Australia, as you can probably imagine, you've got to have 5 or 6 in the set list anywhere you play, especially in rural and regional areas. Sometimes a whole set can just be AC/DC songs. No shit.
Oh, mate, I'd fucking that's to me, that's the best night out ever.
It's incredible. Actually, there are, I think just in my little covers scene here in Brisbane, there's 3 or 4 AC/DC cover bands just in that I know personally. God knows how many there are across Australia. And I'm sure in the UK and the US as well, but there's something about that band that just seems to... it's universally endearing. And I think it just sort of drills back to these young fellas. I know they were born in Glasgow, but they were born and they were raised in Ashfield and Sydney. Just that street attitude that they've got, and how real and raw, and how the directness of the music. It speaks to just about everybody. Yeah, you know, and the fact that they're expats as well, you know, it's because Scotland, I mean, you know, it's a pretty fucking rough place. You know, Glasgow, I mean, you know, it's, you know, it's, there's no messing about with people from Glasgow. They've got a reputation, you know, and, they're amazing. I can't, you know, I tell everyone here, it's like, if you want to get the shit kicked out of you in Australia, just walk into any pub and say AC/DC are shit. You won't fucking leave. I'm telling you. No, you know? it actually gets to a point. And I made this point of all people to Doug Wimbish from Living Colour, because being a bassist, Doug's one of my main men, and it got to a point where I was trying to avoid people who had an AC/DC fascination because playing in a band with them was so annoying because all they wanted me to do was pump out quarter notes and turn the volume right down exactly like Dave, Dave Evans is the Australian bass player. Who's the Cliff Williams, like what he does, and it just got so annoying because doing that for, collectively speaking, 4.5 hours, because if you're playing 4 1-hour sets plus an encore or what have you, God, you get bored. You get so bored and you forget where, because they want to do simple versions of songs, even if they've got a risque bass line or what have you. So yeah, it definitely, it's so ubiquitous here, man, that as I say, as a muso, I just got to a point where I didn't want to play in a band with any of these guys who had a fascination, not because I don't love the band myself, but because being around people who did meant that I knew what my role was going to be what the role I was going to force to play as a bass player. So it's it's got its good and its bad sides, I suppose, in Australia, but can't complain about the music, and just for you and the stuff that you've played on. Gosh, I mean, Lock Up, Brujeria, of course, Cradle of Filth, the big one for me, Dimmu, God knows how many other bands that you've just done sessions with, like we talked about Anathema. But do you have an album or even a moment, a live performance, so your choice, that you think stands head and shoulders above all others?
I'm very proud of the Dimmu records I played on and the Old Man's Child album. Because when I left Cradle, my number one, my mindset was like, I've got to make the drums fucking absolutely destroy anything I did with Cradle.
Okay.
I really step up and, up my fucking A game on this. And with Dimmu, they had a lot more fast double kick parts in their songs. So when we was writing, they were like, no, we need doubles on that part. Doubles there. I'm like, oh, okay. And they really, worked me in that sense, and they helped build up my chops. And I say my feet were probably the fastest around that time.
Oh yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, you and Silent Osman were a great team.
Yeah, and I'm still good friends with him even today. I speak to him pretty much every day online, and my time in Norway was very special. I really cherished that time and look back at it with fond memories.
So there's people like myself whose most prominent memories of yourself are Cradle of Filth, but that was 25 years ago or thereabouts, 20 years ago at least, longer, but 22 years ago thereabouts. So, yeah. So do you have fans that aren't even aware of your work in Cradle, that are more familiar with some of your more recent work?
Yeah. Some people. Oh, you were in Cradle of Filth. Oh, okay. Yeah, but to be honest, there's been so many band members come and go from that band. I mean, you can't blame anyone for being hard pushed to remember everyone.
Indeed, yeah, indeed.
But no, it's mainly Cradle and Dimmu that I get that recognition for. An old child. Lock Up. The music's very brutal and everything, but it's very much an underground band. Those who know. That kind of thing.
Yes, I remember the first album. I can't remember. You were on the. Please tell me you're on the first album because I've always thought that you were. I can't remember the name of it now. It's good.
All
the orange and yellow cover. Yeah, the orange and yellow cover. Sorry, I tend to
play tapes too.
Yeah, that was when Pete was in the band then, wasn't he?
Yes, that's right. The reason why we got Tomper in on the second album is because on the first album we got so many offers to tour and play live, and and this is no disrespect to Pete. I love him. He's one of our best friends. I've known him for years. We like, for instance, we got offered the tour with Immortal and Satyricon in the US.
Gosh, yeah.
And Pete was like, yeah, I'm up for it. But then, of course, when it come to okay, right, we've got to submit the paperwork for the visas. Oh, I can't do it, man. I'm doing the new Dark Funeral record, and so it kind of held us back a little bit. But it's just one of them things. At the time, he had Hypocrisy. He was doing Pain, and he had a full-time studio. So, you can only stretch yourself so far.
Were you ever in the mix for the Celtic Frost gig? Because I imagine you would have been one of the drummers out there that could have done it.
Tom Fisher said to me again. He said for the Triptykon thing, he said that you were one of the drummers that I was considering, but I've heard a lot of crazy stories about you.
Oh Jesus!
Again, that old chestnut. It's like fucking hell. What is it? There's people way more out of control than me. But it is what it is. It's I probably it probably wouldn't have been for me anyway. Even though that I love the music, because I have to gel with the people on a personal level too. And I know Tom is a great musician and a beautiful human being, but he's very straight and direct, and I'm a bit of a clown,
that album could have been a lot more. I think Monotheist, I think, needed someone like your touch, because the drummer that they selected, and I think Tom's even hinted at it, the drummer that they selected might have been, I'm only talking about what I'm hearing, so I should say allegedly heard, I suppose, but was responsible, I think, for the band breaking up ultimately, and Triptykon then becoming the thing. So someone, and I put that down to him, not necessarily because it's somebody whose name I can't recall now, and I don't think I've heard of since. What he needed to work with a seasoned professional like yourself who got that sometimes you follow, sometimes you lead, and I think you understand that.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I'm a huge Frost fan too. It would have been an absolute honour. But to be, I don't have any regrets or hard feelings. I mean, to be even considered, when there's so many killer drummers in the world, to even, be on a short list to do Triptykon, it's an honour. I didn't get the gig, but hey, it's still there's still great records.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with of course, I've read a little bit that Tom's talked about the very heavy cross that Celtic Frost is for him, but he seems to dip in and out of that outfit, doesn't he? Because I bought it for a Christmas present for myself, ironically, the Triptykon, I think it was with a Berlin Symphonic or a Dutch Symphonic Orchestra. Did you know the most recent album that I can't remember the name, but sorry.
The Roadburn thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, you get it. Yeah, and that's got a couple of Celtic songs on it, and so I don't know what it is that he has an odd relationship with Celtic Frost for a band that is probably the most important extreme metal band of all time. I've got to say, in terms of its influence, because I think it's influenced just about every extreme metal band ever.
Yep. I mean, there'd be no Obituary or Goat Law without Frost, that's for sure.
Trevor Perez, he's got that down pat, hasn't he? That slow, doomy riffing, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever perform? I know the Tardy brothers are at the centre of Obituary, but was there ever a moment where, is it John Tardy who's on the drums or Donald Tardy? I can't remember. It's one of the two that is Donald. Donald, was there ever a moment where he called you up and said, "Look, I can't do this tour or this show. Could you step in?" Because you could have done that one as well.
No, but I know Donald. He's a killer drummer. For me, he's like the Filth of death metal.
Definitely.
He's all groove. Rock solid fucking groove all the way. And it's I've never been asked to drum for Obituary, but I certainly wouldn't pass it up.
It was really interesting in Brisbane when they toured about a year and a half ago or so. It was probably when I noticed that extreme metal had made the big jump and had become dad rock, because there's people like myself. I've got two daughters and, I had to be home. I was having a light beer and I looked around me and I thought, Jesus, everybody looks like me. I got you and I got similar beards and we all sort of look similar, same sort of commitments, but here we are rocking out like it's 1991 all over again. It was probably the moment that I noticed that had happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think, that shit was like 30 years ago. Like, when you look at the concept of time, 30 years ago, okay, well, 30 years ago would have been 1960. You know what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yep.
When you look at how different music was in 1960 to 1990, and then look at how music really hasn't changed that much from 1990 to now. You see what I mean? It's crazy.
I do, and I've thought about the same way. I thought exactly what you're saying. The big jumps from the 60s to the 90s, and then you go from the 90s to now, yet the bands are virtually the same. Actually, you could even make a case for 1980 with Metallica. Metallica is still about the biggest band in the world.
Yeah, pretty much, I'd say. If Pantera was still around, I think they would have given Metallica a run for their money now.
I was going to bring that up. I'd love to see you and Phil Anselmo do something together. I think Phil's fantastic, by the way. I've spoken to him and seen him perform.
I love him to bits. Yeah, I love him to bits. Every time he sees me, that low, gravelly voice with Barker.
But is that a possibility? I mean, he does so much stuff. Surely to goodness you can be enlisted to do something with him that way.
I mean, it's with a lot of musicians, especially at festivals when we're all hanging out, because it's the only time you get to see all of your mates in all the other bands is when you play festivals, wherever. So it just turns into a massive piss up, and everyone says it's, oh, we should do a band together sometime. Yeah, that'd be killer. But very seldomly does anything come to fruition. And I think Philip has said to me, like, I want some big boy drums happening sometime. I was like, yeah, I can do that.
You're the man.
I mean, all he's got to do is hit me up and say, look, get your ass over to New Orleans, and I'm there, basically,
Yeah, I didn't mind Scour. I like the stuff he does that's got a bit of melody in it, which is why I like the Illegals project that he's got, which is by far and away the closest thing he's ever done to Pantera. He's got this thing where he wants to go quite gnarly and very grindy, and I think that's fine, but I think he's got a beautiful melodic voice, like Down, for example. You could have been in Down easily. You would have been perfect.
I mean, did you see... Did you see? Have you seen the footage of him singing the Alice in Chains songs with Jerry Cantrell?
I have. Yeah.
Oh my god! Like, wow. I mean, he's up there. It's Philip Anselmo. He's amazing.
Yeah.
I wasn't really a Pantera fan back in the early 90s because I was young and it was all about Norwegian black metal and West Coast hip hop for me.
West Coast hip hop. I've seen you in an NWA t-shirt.
Yeah, well, for me, hip hop and metal, there's a parallel. They're the two genres that scare the establishment the most, and they're the only two genres that really, they kill each other over and shit. It's I don't know anybody else that. The murder thing, and the extremity, the lyrics. It's like, for me, NWA are like the Slayer of hip hop.
Yes.
It's like they were on the FBI's most wanted list. At one point, and it's, and you'd be surprised too. A lot of the rappers, they're all like metalheads.
Look,
and the same with a lot of a lot of metalheads are like really like banging to the hip hop. Like Scarface from the Ghetto Boys. He's a huge metal fan. He's come to gigs before when we played in Houston, and on even some of his solo records, there's a lot of references to metal. In one of his songs, he actually says the words "screaming for vengeance," but he screams it like Rob Halford.
Wow.
The band La Coca Nostra, which is Everlast, Danny Boy, Ill Bill, they're all huge metalheads. Ill Bill, all of his raps, they've all got like connotations to heavy metal songs, metal stuff. And yes, it's a genre that I love. I mean, I love I love all kinds of music now. As I've got older, I mean, my palate's changed. You know, when I was a kid, it was all Norwegian black metal, West Coast hip hop. You know, and now, I love The Cure, The Mission. I can listen to Elvis, the Eagles, Creedence.
Oh, God, yeah.
You know, good music's good music. It doesn't matter what genre it is. If it's good, it's good.
It's a good point you raised there about hip hop and West Coast hip hop in particular there, because God knows I've tried, I just can't do it, and I've spoken about it quite a bit on the podcast with some artists, and I was massively into Body Count when they came out, particularly as I was a burgeoning guitarist at the time. Ernie C. Ernie C's lines were probably the most complicated lines that I learnt up to that point. And I remember giving him that feedback. Ernie C. couldn't believe that he was influencing young fellas in Australia play the guitar, but that was indeed the case. But I think that I think it's just music it's a rebellious music. It's music of the outsider. And it definitely just depends on I guess it's got a pretty bizarre parallel here, but it's just like what do you like, chocolate or vanilla, in terms of an ice cream flavour? Yeah. But they're virtually the same thing, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what attracted me to hip hop is because it's drum beat orientated. Everything evolves around the beats.
Yes.
And being a drummer, I just found that the beats were so infectious, and like when they started rhyming over it, and certain samples, and a lot of them, before the sampling became a copyright issue. So many hip hop bands in the late 80s, early 90s would use metal samples.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Public Enemy used the Angel of Death riff on She Watched Channel Zero, because Rick Rubin produced the album, and obviously his relationship with Slayer. Look at the Beastie Boys, License to Ill.
Led Zeppelin, yeah.
Yeah, and Gary King plays the solos on a couple of songs. Well, actually, Rick Rubin was doing the Beastie Boys album in Studio B while he was doing Rain in Blood in Studio A. And that's how it came about. Like, hey, Kerry, can you do a solo on this thing for me?
So it was at this point that I needed to go and answer the door, which allowed Nick to go and get a glass of water. Then we got stuck back into things. Hey, mate, thanks a lot for that. The wonders of telepresent and omni-channel communications technology make it feel like as though we were just in the room across the road from each other.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good.
Oh gosh, my kids have got guinea pigs, and
they do.
Yeah, I've got two daughters, 5 and 7, and we've been trying to get a cage, like a transport cage for them for a while, because we've got a place up north as well, and we travel there between here and there, and you can't put them in a shoebox. They're like, they're yay big these days. They're like huge rodents, and but you can't buy these things in shops. Of course, we've got a. Don't know if you've been following what's going on, but we've got this trade issue at the moment with China. So things.
I think everybody's got trade issues with China, mate.
Oh my God, I think a lot of nervous people in Australia at the moment, actually, because the CCP are a pack of cunts. We know that, but a lot of Australian industry relies on them. To be able to import into that market,
Well, it's the same here, mate. There's a lot of Chinese money in the UK. All of the inner city developments, all these new skyscrapers going up, most of it's Chinese money. Chinese or Russian.
Russian, yeah. You guys get a lot of that, don't you? There's a shitload of Polish and Ukraine and Russians in UK these days, isn't there?
Yeah, especially Polish. I've got a few Polish mates here. I think they're good lads. They like a drink.
They do. Yeah, we got an established Polish community here that came here after World War II. So they're like third or fourth generation removed now. But they never quite leave the Polish thing, if you know what I'm saying. It's not like,
no.
We're a lot of Brits. I mean, you got Brits that are here that were like, the young family that basically ditch it and they just become Australians straight away. But a lot of the Eastern Europeans, like my...
I'd do the same, mate. If I could get an Aussie passport, take the British one. It's fucking shit. I'd love to live and work in Australia.
Why don't you do it then? Is there anything preventing you from? Kids, of course, family.
No, because my kids are grown up now, and I live alone. I'm divorced. But you see, all I do is music. I've done this my entire adult professional life. So, whatever transferable skills there is there, I've got no work experience in any other industry. And because of Australia's kind of geographically challenged, if you like, it's going to, Europe's so far away, like, whereas here, Europe's pretty much my backyard.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I can be in the States in like 6 hours.
Yeah, I only started travelling as an adult. It was the airline tickets back in the 80s and early 90s were exorbitant to fly out of Australia. So consequently, we used to go to Fiji and New Caledonia. Used to go to New Caledonia a bit with my grandparents.
Oh, lovely.
God, to be honest with you, why else would you need to go anywhere else if you've got these places on your doorstep? And it was kind of strange because you go to these places and they look like home. They just had different people there.
Yeah.
So it'd be it was semi-tropical, subtropical, or what have you. And sometimes they were just, and with all due respect to New Caledonia, Noumea is just a dirtier version of almost any Australian small town. If you ever go there, with the good old French influence there. But yeah, it was only as an adult that I started travelling a lot. And holy shit, I've not got a fear of flying. I just hate being stuck in a metal tube for 18 hours at a time, which is basically what you are when you fly out of Australia to Europe and the US.
Yeah. Well, see, I've got a phobia of heights. It's weird. Like, I can't go out onto a balcony, say like in a hotel, and look over the edge. I'll feel nauseous. It feels like somebody's going to push me or I'm going to jump. But I have to sit by the window on a plane. It's crazy.
That's
I feel safer. Yeah. I feel safer sat in the plane looking 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet down than what I do looking over the edge of a balcony, say 22 stories up.
I'm exactly the same way. I've got to share that with you because I hate heights. I can't. As soon as you get about 25 meters up on a balcony with me, I'm sort of arms out, looking over the edge, and my wife's going, "Stop being a dickhead." It's like, no, seriously, I don't like this. And airplanes,
mate, the fourth rung on the ladder, I'm getting vertigo.
Yeah, well, we all have our things, man. Yeah, you can't help our character types. Yeah.
But I'd love to move to Australia. It's a pipe dream, but I'd have to meet some desperate Aussie lady that'd want to marry me. So I wouldn't be eligible just to. Hi, it's Barker. I'm here now. It's not like that.
There's quite a few. There's quite a few Brit and American musicians who live down here very quietly. Like, you might have known that the Chili Peppers guys were living down here, but Flea is Australian. Yeah. People just don't realise that, but he's actually a born and bred Aussie.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought he was California.
No, he's got this massive California, thing going on, has the image going on, but no, his whole family, I think, is in Melbourne or Canberra, one of the two. Right. And I had mates that used to go down to a place called Ulladulla, and they'd be walking along, and there's Flea, and Michael Balzery, as he's known to his family. There's just down the road from me here in Byron Bay. It's it's about 150 kilometres away, but northern New South Wales. For whatever reason, the Hollywood elite have decided that they want to live there. So Orlando Bloom I know the Hemsworths are Australian anyway, but a lot of these American, the Swan woman, Natalie Portman. I think she's there these days as well. This is what you hear, and people sort of are like, "Oh, they were just in here the other day." This sort of thing. It's like, "Whoa, what the hell are they doing here?" But I think we're just far enough away from the bullshit, but still, we're far enough away physically from the bullshit, but still connected to the Western Hemisphere, still part of the Western Hemisphere. That you can sort of feel connected, but at the same time, if you want to go off the grid, you can.
Absolutely, yeah. That's weird that all the Hollywood are moving down under now, then, because, I guess the US is fucked. I think
that's what's happening, brother. Yeah, that's the problem, man.
I know a lot of people in California are getting the fuck out of California.
I was going to mention that. Yeah,
it's too expensive. It's absolutely. And the thing now, they're all moving down there. It's going to jack up all your prices. Rent and everything all around the area where they're at, it's going to be out of the fucking roof. You know, it's terrible. I mean, you know, ordinary, it's getting harder and harder for people like us to live, you know.
It's
And,
Sydney and Melbourne have gone, as far as I'm concerned. They're both just shitholes.
Yeah.
And if you go, I mean, I'm sure they're lovely if you visit them, but trying to live in either of those two cities, mate, I can't tell the difference between them and Los Angeles these days. To be honest, man, they're just big shitty
Melbourne.
Places.
Sydney, you know, I can take all the, but yeah, Melbourne is my spot if I had to have one.
But even like Melbourne's changing. Yeah, Perth is fantastic. I've got to say, preface I've never been there, but I've spoken to so many musicians from over there that there's Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth are what I call fairly normal. Yeah. Like, you know, like you can sort of get by. Sydney and Melbourne, you better have $1 million or thereabouts behind you. Otherwise, you're living in the boonies somewhere and commuting, you know, 80, 90 kilometres into the CBD for your job.
Sure.
You know,
it's pretty much the same, mate. You know, all the major cities, London, Birmingham, Manchester, you know, it's all fucked everywhere.
Well, Birmingham's, gosh, I can't tell you the amount of Brits that are from Birmingham that live here on the Gold Coast, man. There's enough for many supporter soccer buses, if you know what I'm saying. Or you know, Wolverhampton or what have you is the team up that way.
Yeah.
But there's a shit ton of, man. The stories that I'm hearing coming out of Birmingham aren't pleasant.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. It's a fucking cesspool, you know, and it's just life in the inner cities, I guess, isn't it? You know, if I get a lottery win, I'm coming down to Oz and just gonna buy a ranch.
Well, we'd welcome you, mate. You know, we'd welcome you. If you need a sponsor, you know who to contact.
Thank you.
Yeah, mate. Look, I'll wrap things up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your candour and your frankness and your willingness to have a conversation about things that are very important to me as a fan. And for people that are going to listen to this, man, I don't know how many. Look, I'll
it's all good, mate. It's all good. I mean, you know, some people might say, "Oh, you know, it's not cool airing dirty laundry," but it's not really dirty laundry. I've not even scratched the surface. You know, I think genuine fans they need to hear this. You know, because it needs to be spoken about. People need to know, you know, what happened and why things are how they are.
I'm serious about writing that book as well. I'm very passionate about the topic, as you can tell, and I think yourself, the three of you, man, are just so integral to not just extreme metal and not just heavy metal, but music in general. Because they're a Cradle of Filth. There are people who listen to those albums that then make decisions that go on to. They make decisions that then mean that they go on to become classical musicians. And they have careers that way. That's how important I think some of that work is, man. And writing a book and I'm with you, man. It's not dirty laundry, you know why? Because it's your truth. It's your lived experience, and that's not dirty laundry, man. That's just you explaining your perspective on things.
Yeah, and it is the truth. Les and Stuart will back me up 100% on this. You know,
Stuart,
because
yeah. Well, Stuart went into a lot of detail, and that's what fans love, man. People love hearing the detail, and they want to know because the music is so meaningful to them. And you know, eventually, I'll within 12 months, man, I'll reach out to you all because I'm on that path to doing it now.
You're more than welcome to hit me up anytime, mate. It'd be a pleasure.
Yeah, well, mate, it sounds like you're comfortable with everything we're talking about, so I'm just going to release it basically as it is in context, so as that people can, you know, people love listening to these. You know what people are like with podcasts, man. They just put on their headphones.
Mate, I listen to them all the time. I'm a Joe Rogan podcast freak.
Likewise,
you know,
love Joe, man. How have you coped with the transition to Spotify? Because I wasn't even on Spotify before.
No, well, see, I'm not on Spotify. I watch all of his old podcasts on YouTube. Still,
yeah.
You know, see, I'm not a Spotify guy. I'm iTunes, which just because I use Apple products and whatever. So you know, Spotify. I mean, iTunes, Spotify. I guess it's the same thing, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it is. I think. I mean, the Apple are definitely the evil empire too. They're not any better than Spotify, but there's just something disingenuous about Spotify that I can't get my head around. You know, like the CEO was right. He was right in saying that musicians need to effectively become social media stars, but I hate that. It's
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, pay what we do.
Yeah.
It's like you wouldn't. He wouldn't be sitting in his multi-million-dollar house if it wasn't for us making the music.
Absolutely.
So how about some of that love trickles down to the people that made you who you are?
Yeah, agreed.
But I know the change this. Yeah, you have to be. Every musician, you've got to be a social media star these days, and that's kind of where a lot of my friends, musicians, peers, tell me, that's where I'm going wrong. But you got to be more of a fucking social media whore. You need to like quadruple the likes. It's all about likes and shares, and I'm old school, mate. You know what I mean?
I'm the same way. Yeah.
My kids are always telling me, "Oh, you should be way more bigger on social media than what you are, and you sold yourself short, Dad, and blah blah blah." And basically, I need someone, a babysitter, to like, look, let me handle it all. I'll handle the content. You just tell me what you want and this and that, and I'll tell you what to do and blah blah. I think that's probably the way to go for me.
Oh yeah, but the thing that I love about you, man, is you're authentic. You're the real deal. You're the genuine article. And a lot of shit on social media is just hot air and bullshit. And you don't
Absolutely, yeah.
like me, mate. Like I think I get. This is no boast, but I've got hundreds of thousands of listeners to the podcast, but I've got fuck all social media engagement. So there's a disc. You understand that, like you, man. Like you're the same way. Like you've got literally millions of people have bought the albums you've appeared on. Yet your social media appearance might not be as big as, say, I don't know, Lil Bow Wow or whatever.
I've got 4,000 followers on Instagram.
It's a lot more than me, man.
But, no, I look at some guys and like, how come he's got fucking 25,000? What's the secret? But if all your podcast listeners want to hook up on my Instagram, it's official Nicholas Barker, drummer.
It is. You got a good stream. I like it too. As I say, it's authentic. For people like myself who don't like the fluff and don't like the product placement and all the rest of it, just want a bit of an insight into your day to day. You give us that.
Yeah. Well, you got to do what you got to do, haven't you?
Indeed. So, look, I'll release this as it is, mate. In good faith, mate. I just do that. I don't edit, But I'll reach out to yourself, and I've got to reach out to Stuart again in the near future. Actually, we do occasionally communicate with each other, but the next person I've got to talk to is Les. So I've got to get him on, man, because he's. I know he's a busy guy, and he was only here recently. He was here with Paradise Lost recently.
That's right. Yeah.
But I didn't catch up with him. Yeah, I was, you get busy, and then you think I'll go to that show, and then I didn't go to the show, which meant that I couldn't catch up with him. And Greg was actually going to hook me up. Greg McIntosh was going to link me up, and I thought, well, I should have done it, but it was just fuck. It was one of those things. I think I had uni on the next day or something, and thought, no, I won't. Won't sort of get too.
Feel free to hit him up, mate. I mean, I'm sure I'd love to talk to you. Get his side of the story out there because, like I say, people want to hear it, and
they do, man. And look, this book, once it gets out there, man, it can be, it'll be the thing that I think sets the record straight. Okay, because to your point earlier, the Marilyn Manson version of Cradle of Filth is just shit, and I never got in. As soon as I heard MIDI, and I was like, that's it, I'm done. I knew straight away that without you guys there, that was the reason it was garbage. And there's a ton of people out there like me, man. It's not like I'm just this voice in the wilderness, like I said earlier, and having a book out there that I think actually has your perspective and talks through the process of writing the songs, and even going back in your case to Principle of Evil. People want that, mate. That's, people want to hear this shit. They want to know.
Yeah. You know what I'll do then? I'll go through all my old fucking stash of archive stuff. I've got a treasure trunk, like literally full of photographs.
Oh man,
man! I'll go through and if you're serious about the book, I'll get some cool photographs for you.
You are literally. I'm writing my podcast memoir, which of course you were in it anyway. But certainly this conversation will feature in it. I'll just include it in my 7,000 word entry that I've already done on Cradle of Filth. But I'm writing a Hare Krishna devotee's biography. He's
Cool.
the guy. He's what we call a 10-pound pom. So he's one of these Brits that came out to Australia on the SS Australia or Australis, I think it was.
Yeah.
His father and he taught Prince Charles how to surf. This guy.
Brilliant.
So I'm writing.
If only it was only it was 10 quid for the Poms to get over there now.
Well, indeed, yeah, indeed. But look, I'm writing his in the city. Actually, I've got a placement with the State Library, so I'll be in there doing that. But after that, man, it's you guys. That's it.
Brilliant.
Because I know what'll happen, man. Is I'm trying to be instead of going into news media, doing that, I'm being an author. So, but I'm doing passion projects first up because that's how I think. To be honest with you, I think that's how I'll establish my name. But it's a very authentic way I think of doing it because these are stories that need to be told.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So. Cool. But mate, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate all the time. But let's stay in touch and let's just chat in the near future. Yeah.
Mate, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute honour.
Wonderful. All right, well, we'll chat soon.
All right, mate. You take care.
No worries, brother. Okay, talk to you. Okay.
All right, later.
You have been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. That interview subject was none other than extreme metal drum leviathan Nick Barker. Thanks so much for listening.